Welcome to our June book club. We made it through the first half of the year, so thanks to everyone who's joined us for several of these or all of these events. Um, my name is Stephanie Steinberg, for those of you just joining us tonight. We're very excited to have, he said, call him Bill, so we're going to call him Bill Penn with us to talk about Raising Bean. And before we get to our book talk of the evening, I just want to say thank you to the Wayne State University Press for partnering with us for this book club.
I thought, if it's okay with you people tonight, I thought I would read from part of the book. It will take about 15 minutes, maybe a little bit longer. I'm not quite sure. I did practice it, but it could take that long. And then the reason I picked it is because it, for me, exemplifies the position that I want to exist in, both as a person and as a writer. And I thought it might give us something to talk about, if that's okay. So I'll start with that. It's from the essay called Not Nobody. Oops. And Anne has, people are disappearing from me. Is that okay? Okay. All right. So I'll just go ahead and start and then we'll talk. Is that agreeable? Not Nobody. This is Be All That You Can Be Week in Claire Bean's school. Some fool from the local university's education department spent the afternoon telling Bean's class that they could be all they wanted to be, an adaptation of the U.S. Army's Be All That You Can Be. To inculcate this idea into the little vats of bone and blood sitting cross-legged on the gymnasium floor, they chanted, "You are somebody," over and over and in between. Being what one wants to be is not the same as being all that one can be. The slogans not only involve the differences between can and want, but also involves taking long and honest looks at the basic material out of which the can may be made. Ms. Fickle said we can be anything we want in the modern world now today. I feel the tension in Bean's grip. She knows how much I object to verbal constructions that try to use here and nowness to gain the veneer of importance while denying the old hattedness of what once were good ideas developed over years, even centuries. Bean knows that I think that human beings have changed little since the hairy dawn of A Space Odyssey 2001. They certainly still do the same things, like love or hook up, fight and argue, disagree and agree, and with careful thinking and possibly education, grow less intolerant. No matter how much money Big Pharma invests, they still grow old and die. Ms. Fickle says we should want to be somebody, to be important, and to change the world. What does Mrs. Weary say? Nothing. Wise choice, I think. She made us all say what it was we wanted to be. Did you say anything? She shrugged. She shook her head. No, she hadn't. She had learned the lessons of Odysseus, that shouting out your name and origins can wreak havoc on your travel plans. At first, that man known as a master storyteller told the one-eyed monster Polyphemus that his name was Nobody, and Polyphemus, enamored of the importance of names and branding, went around laughing at Nobody while eating Odysseus's men 2 by 2. Cleverly, he and his last 6 crewmen hang below the fleecy bellies of the Cyclops' fattened sheep, and when the monster rolls aside the massive stone to allow the sheep out to graze the next day, they are free to run to their ship and row out beyond the grasp of the Cyclops, where in a moment of hubris, Odysseus shouts back at the monster that his name is not Nobody, but Odysseus, son of Laertes from Ithaca, getting for his proud foolhardiness a massive boulder thrown at him by Polyphemus, barely missing his ship. Worse, going from nobody to somebody allows Polyphemus to protest to Dad about his blinding, and Dad just happens to be Poseidon, who, though he cannot keep Odysseus from Ithaca and home because Athena protects her favorite hero, can and does throw storms and tempests at Odysseus, wrecking his ship and killing his crew, leaving the Greek hero alone to float to the shores of an unknown island, doubling Odysseus's 10-year homecoming journey to 20 years. It is this dangerous shift from nobody to somebody that the writer William Kennedy talks about. After years of rejection, getting blank looks from inquisitors who wanted to know what he had published, not written, but published for the grand sums all writers who matter get, Kennedy described himself as not nobody. It's important to note Kennedy's wisdom and perspicuity. The movement from nobody to not nobody is not the same as the movement from nobody to somebody. A sudden leap from nobody to somebody is a jump into a chasm that is dark with narcissism and self-regard and demands, even to the extreme of corruption, sycophancy, and an almost psychopathic childishness, the trumpeting of one's name in the misty fog, blurring his lack of accomplishment. It leaves a writer who previously learned balance and philosophy and humility, stunned by imbalance and egotism. Timing is everything, and the timing is individually relative. If it's being in early schooling and she gets told chantingly, "You are somebody," and she believes it, there may be trouble. Sure, she is somebody to Bappa, to her family. To her teachers, she is definitely not nobody. To the white Audi that may run her over as she inattentively crosses the street, she is still nobody until the police arrive to record her as somebody the texting driver of the Audi ought to have paid attention to. It is that I teach her now. It is that I teach her. How someone so endlessly important to Bumpa might be endingly unimportant to an inattentive driver. Is that too easy? Well, how about a young writer? How many creative writing students in college, still believing the chant that they are somebody, want not criticism but praise? How many assume it's simply a matter of putting words on the page, being recognized as a talent by an editor willing to advance unseemly amounts of money, and then going on tour to sign autographs for the lines of adoring fans? Even if the editor is sort of right and she detects in the miasma of your writing some skill and possible future promise, which she calls talent, is she really referring to talent or simply to some notion that this stuff might sell? Talent, which derives from balance or a sum of money, is not aptitude or skill, but a means of exchange. And as such, requires at least two people, a buyer and a seller, a reader and a writer, a giver and a taker. Remembering the part of talent that is balance, the taking is more of an accepting and not a getting. Faulkner needed his editor to edit to bring the sound into balance with the fury. I agree with Macbeth that life struts and frets its hour, a tale told by an idiot, or can be, but I don't agree that life signifies nothing. Maybe it's the Indian in me, Bean, but all the love we've exchanged is not nothing, and I think life is the presence or absence of love. Apart from that, in conjunction with William Kennedy's wisdom and humor about becoming not nobody, it raises questions. Does one want, truly want, to be somebody? Do we ever ask children to gradually expand their horizons and think not, I want to be this or that, but ask, do I truly want to be this or that with all the attendant notoriety that goes with the being? In an age in which notability seems to struggle against rising notoriety, we fail to stop and contextualize our thinking. If Bean wants to be a dancer, she may take dance lessons or go to the ballet with Nana. But no one ought to be fooled. She most likely cannot be what she momentarily dreams of being, but she can and may develop a sense of line and movement, a dancing way of relating a narrative. Or a painting class or two might help her understand what Bumpa understood half a century ago, which was that there is Rembrandt, Vermeer, Bruegel, Kandinsky, Matisse, always Matisse, and there was himself, polar opposites in significance and beauty. Although in being all that I can be, I will never be a great or even a good painter, one day I want to take Clara Bean to Florence and let her stand in that room at the Uffizi Gallery with a young, middle-aged, and elderly Rembrandt self-portrait and allow her to see in the colors and brushstroke textures and sheer unadulterated talent of the painter the changes in feelings and attitudes that age brings to perceiving life. Because while I can never be or have been Rembrandt or painted anything as wonderful and moving as those, to see them lifts the heart and codifies the mindfulness of life, and if there is a soul, enriches it. Excuse me a second. The same enrichment, the same calmly broadly felt pleasure comes from Graham Swift's Waterland. The joy that comes from that novel is overwhelming. It is so well told, so plain and apparently simple, and so good as Elizabeth Boland's The Death of the Heart. Great even, although the word great is almost useless when you have Homer or Dante or Njal Saga and the Tale of Genji, Amos Tutuola, Ernest Gaines, or Par Lagervies, the dwarf, among 1,000 other writers who occupy a height overlooking, shading, or encapsulating the soul of the world, telling us who we are and how we might want to be being. They are all notable and deserving our notice, but so is the human being who lives on a human being scale. Bean may be a solar panel installer or an editor or agent, maybe a doctor, a lawyer, the head of a nonprofit for the rights of women, veterans, families separated at the border, whether the Latino families of today or the African families where fathers were sold away from wives and children. Children were sold away from their mothers or grandparents in our history of racism and cruelty. The scale we choose should be, with some foresight and parental or teacherly guidance, match the circumference of our happiness. T.S. Eliot says that no poet or writer has his complete meaning alone. Precisely, Bean, we might extend that. No person has her complete meaning alone. We are human beings, and human beings must live with and around human beings. They have to have the chance to love other human beings. A tribe is not a tribe without men, women, and children who belong and who willingly and thoughtfully follow a leader, a chief. A community is not a community, a state not a state, without communers and staters. And everyone who reads and learns knows that a house divided against itself is not a good thing when Poseidon's hurricanes of change enact their wraths. The Buddhist monk who separates from social contact and goes to meditate alone needs to dine with other monks. The elementary school girl who splits off from her cohort and stares alone at the wall feeling whatever a grammar school girl might feel, also needs lunch, preferably a nutritious and balanced one. The politician needs to know history, the law, and tradition, and take his or her place in the tradition of service to the nation and not to himself. The teacher needs students to guide, to help learn, and to learn from. The auto worker, the cashier at Whole Foods, the doctor, lawyer, and Indian chief all need others, and all need to recognize that they choose to do what they do. It is all there in Sartre's Freedom and Responsibility. It is all there in Ernest Gaines's novels, or William Melvin Kelly's, or Evan Cannell Jr.'s, none of whom shout out their names or origins to the one-eyed monster of commerce that would devour them with the pressure to write another book just like the last one, or consume their time and energy with the attempt to publicly brand their names. None of them is a celebrity, a somebody whose name is, for good or ill, recognized by hundreds or thousands or millions of people. Each of them is not nobody, though. Each of them contributes to the project that is humanity. Even the homeless man on the corner contributes by enlarging our capacities for sympathy, empathy, and generosity. Mr. Ramsey might stand in the bow of the boat shouting, "We perished, each alone," and he'd be right if we understand that without other people being human beings, we do, in essence, perish. But he'd be wrong if we understood the process as binary, as either or, for we live with, for, and because of human beings. If we love probably feel loved ourselves. If we do, then we never perish. We are joined to 7 generations past and 7 generations future. If you are deeply loved, then your 7th great grandchild will hear you spoken well of, and you will be, in a native sense, immortal. immortal. The human beings still speak well of Chief Joseph, and I suspect they will always speak well of him. But remember, he did not seek to be spoken of at all. He was chosen by a moment, and given who he was already being, he allowed himself to become somebody until the end of his life when he sat lonely beside the nighttime campfire and thought what he thought contained and thought and what he thought contained a feeling of regret as well as a feeling of acceptance of the role a man like him was chosen by history and by his people to play. The regret would have been there even if he had not been somebody. So also would be there the reflection that he had spoken as truly and well, had lived as human beingly as possible, and he could never regret that. Christians have a metaphor for the end of life, with the dying person's life passing before his eyes, before his shelf life reaches expiration. Christians seem to find an ending, a completion in this metaphor. It passes before one's eyes, and one judges it, and breathes his last. But there is no ending there. Standing around his deathbed are daughters and granddaughters, sons and grandsons, wives or partners, and they will speak well of him or not. Maybe he didn't feel shame when he should have, or maybe he substituted pride when a process merited only satisfaction. Maybe in his own small way he succeeded in being a better father than his own father, and for that he will be remembered in both word and deed, tale and anecdote. If he tried hard but did not perhaps fully succeed, at least he will have managed to be not nobody. If he doesn't try and remains a bad father, then he will immediately, upon expiration, begin to be forgotten. And 7 generations from the moment of dying, the forgetting will be certain and complete. Being spoken well of is what you ought to seek to earn humbly by being. If you are made to be somebody, then accept the burden. But for heaven's sake, don't shout out your name to the monstrous Polyphemus. In the context of whatever set of processes you choose to involve yourself, being not nobody is what I would have you be, being what in the context of the love you share with me and us, you already are. Hearing you standing at the front door beside your infant brother at 7:10 a.m. shout to your departing father, "Bye, Daddy, I love you," not only gives me great joy, but it also means in my own not nobody way that I've succeeded in something. And that's that.